Welcome everyone to today's fireside chat, and I just want to start by thanking everyone for all the positive feedback we had with episode 1. It's great to hear that the insights that we're sharing are resonating with people and adding value to their security perspectives. We also recognise that it's important to have a diverse set of perspective across the security ecosystem. And so we are broadening this out to include a lot of different stakeholders with different views. So we've got a really exciting roster of speakers coming up over the next few months. So definitely stay tuned and subscribe to our updates. So in this episode, we're excited to dive into the evolving world of developer security with one of our design partners, where today's discussion centers on how organizations can better integrate security into the software development process. Doing this whilst not sacrificing speed, innovation, or developer experience. And we're really honored to have Tim Thatcher with us. Now, Tim is a principal in information security, governance, and risk management for one of the world's largest financial institutions. And Tim brings a wealth of experience in helping organizations embed security into their development life cycles, ensuring that security is both a priority and an enabler for growth. So we're covering some really interesting themes like secure by design, the shift left movement, and how to balance security with developer experiences. And so Tim's insight will really help us explore how teams can strike that right balance between innovation and protection. So thank you, Tim, for joining us. We're really looking forward to engaging in this conversation. And let's get started right away by having you introduce yourself and share your journey into the world of developer security.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invite, Nithin and Mark. And a common question I get, am I related to Margaret Thatcher? Not that I know of. So just I had to throw that out there. No, as you mentioned, I'm currently serving as principal information security governance and risk manager for one of the world's largest financial institutions. I have more narrowly focused my attention into the developer security space recently with the advent of Executive Order 14028, which is essentially an all-of-government effort to improve our nation's cybersecurity. And that came out, by the way, in May of 2021.
Perfect. So jumping into, I guess, 3 or 4 themes for today, we're going to look through secure by design, what that means, why it's becoming more popular, and then the notion of shifting left by integrating security as early as possible into that process, which is all wonderful stuff. But then, of course, how do you balance the security side of things and also give a really great developer experience, reducing friction and making developers continue to be productive? And we'll also talk a little bit about how Klarytee have worked together with you as well. So I guess my first question, and Nithin jump in as well and answer this as well, but secure by design is becoming much more mainstream. Why do you think it's gaining popularity now?
Well, from my standpoint, and I didn't know this at first, but secure by design is actually not a new concept. Carnegie Mellon Software Engineering Institute wrote a technical report in 2009 on secure design patterns, based in part on architect Chris Alexander's introduction of the concept of design patterns way back in 1977. And I haven't got to that book yet, but I will. However, the idea has been given new life with the advent of the executive order I mentioned earlier, and the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISO, has been tasked with other things, among other things, promoting the secure by design message, and has been doing so vigorously since early 2023.
So just curious, Tim, so you obviously have a huge breadth of experience in government and the private sector. I think historically security technology has always been, government has been early adopters of it and then private sector has followed. But, recently a lot of the technologies, it's sort of been reversed. where do you see security by design being implemented the most? Do you see obvious patterns between government and private sector, or is there no obvious early adopter here?
For me, it's clearly government first, right? So because it's the federal government, the White House, the executive office, right? It basically can force the government to do what it wants to do. It's the government, right? But it cannot force private entities to do so unless it's a rule, reg, or law, which it is not. However, it may be, these executive orders may be a pretext to future requirements, right? These best practices that are kind of built in the executive orders and the standards and frameworks that are born out of those executive orders are becoming best practices within private industry. And the whole secure by design approach, at least until recently, has been to kind of coax organizations, private industry, to just kind of come on board willingly. However, there's been a shift very recently from secure by design to secure by demand. That came out, I think, about a week ago. And so the CISO, which is kind of tasked with leading the charge on this, is obviously, at least from my point of view, taking a more aggressive approach and to, using their words, demanding that some software developers, right, actually do these things, right, versus asking. And it's becoming more of an expectation.
And that's a really interesting point, because I guess it over time, I'm guessing that the intention there is to enforce this across supply chains and therefore address some of the big problems around supply chain security that's traditionally always sort of crossed over with security by design as well.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we look, a lot of the organizations out there don't really have any incentives. Well, let's just put it this way. They have more of an incentive with the status quo, right? Versus doing the things that need to be done, like building in security requirements from the beginning, right? It's not in their best interest to do that with the way things are right now. Let's just put it that way.
Is that because basically there's practically the practical steps to get there it's just too challenging right now, and people are being squeezed to do more with less as it is? Or do you think there is more of a kind of like, I'll get round to that at some point in the future?
I think it's probably a little bit of that, but you've probably heard of this term called shrinkflation. It came out in Biden's State of the Union address, but I've noticed that practice, if you will, way before that State of the Union address. But he gave it a term to it, and it's very apt, right? And so if you go to a local McDonald's, as an example, right, and you buy a Big Mac, right, or a double quarter pounder with cheese, right? And you guys look around my age. So back when I was a kid, when I got a double quarter pounder with cheese, it was actually a quarter pounder with cheese. If you put it on a scale, it's about a quarter pound, right? But today, if you go there and you try to get the same quarter pounder with cheese, right, it's like super thin. It's like this. It's not a quarter pound. I guarantee you it's not a quarter pounder, right? And you see that in other things too. You go to the local market and you buy some mayonnaise, right? It looks like the same jar, but you flip it over on the bottom and there's a big giant inverted cone. So what that does is it makes the consumer think it's the same amount, but it's not. It's actually less content. And so what the trend that I've seen across the board, no matter what industry you're in, is that there's a couple ways for organizations to make money or save money, right? You can usually, one of the most common ones is to cut operational costs, lay people off. Well, you can't do that in some cases, right? You need the people to do the job, but you have to make profit margins, right? So how do you do that? Well, you got to shave it somewhere. Well, let's shave it from the content. Let's do that. Let's do less for more instead of doing more for less. It's actually the other way around, right? And so the trend that I'm seeing here across, again, and it may even include, it appears that it's included here in cybersecurity and security in general, is that these companies are spinning up these quote unquote solutions, but doing so in an MVP or minimum viable product way, right? And then just putting, this MVP onto the market and just allowing consumers to bear the burden of security implications and so on and so forth. Whether the consumer is an individual like myself or you, or an organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's a really interesting point, actually. I'd love to get your take on why that's actually happening specifically in industry, because it does feel like in security, it's one of those things where you can never cover all your bases anyway, right? So very often, especially when I work with other startups that are in a hurry to get products into the market, like you mentioned, you do see them prioritizing because they just don't think that they can cover all. Do you think that that's part of the problem, knowing what to prioritize in security? Do you see that as an equally big challenge, or do you think that the pressure is more about doing the least amount possible?
Well, are you, or just for clarity, are you referring to like the end user organization, or you talk about the manufacturer, the ones who actually create these solutions?
I would say probably more relevant for the manufacturers who create the solutions.
Sure. I don't have any direct proof, of course, but my gut tells me that's probably a little bit of a mixture, right? At the end of the day, any company, any business is in business to make money. At the end of the day, right? So, it, if you're a startup, and we're in a situation right now where, because of just bad coding practices, right? You have unsafe programming languages that we've been practicing for decades, C++, assembly, so on and so forth, right? Been doing that for decades. And now it's coming back to bite us, right? And so I think Google did some research on this not too long ago, and it shows up to 70% of the vulnerabilities stem from unsafe programming languages, right? And that so it makes sense that if you start shifting away from unsafe programming languages to safe programming languages such as Rust or Java or Python as an example, right? And then you're going to reap some huge benefits, right? And then conversely, right? So because these practices have been around for so long, you have lots of these cyber solutions in the market right now that are catering to organizations that are continuing these unsafe program language practices, right? So just imagine if a large organization, any organization, no longer did that, and it was just built on purely safe programming languages, they'd have very little need for some of the cyber solutions that you see out on the market today. A large part of that industry would just evaporate, right? And I think that some of those organizations know that, and they know they have a finite amount of time to be in existence, because once these organizations start understanding that is really the root cause of much of the vulnerabilities that they're seeing today, right? And they solve for that, these companies are going to go away.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And I guess, you and I have spent a lot of time talking about shift left, the idea of shift left and developer security and a lot around that. I guess for the benefit of our listeners, I'd love to get your views on what the definition of shift left is and how you see that impacting a lot of the things that we just talked about today.
Sure. Well, shift left essentially is, you know, building in security up front in a typical software development lifecycle versus bolting it on after the fact, after it's been released into production, right? Which is we've seen as really the practice in decades past. But there's been a lot of movement here, I would say, in the last few years towards this shift left mindset, right? Which is a great thing, right? And it's a more proactive approach versus a reactive approach. But that can be challenging, right? That's again, that's still a band-aid solution, in my opinion, versus the true root cause, which is unsafe programming languages, right? But the thing is, with changing that, making that shift from unsafe to safe programming languages is a huge lift. It would be a huge lift in a multi-year endeavor. So that can't be done right away. So in the interim, yes, shift left approach is appropriate, and it should be done.
So, Tim, what practical first steps someone take? I phrase this in two questions really. So someone that has legacy code today, an old application that's been running in the market that they know is insecure, what practical steps should they take? And then also someone designing a brand new product, an MVP, what practical steps should they take? And so what advice would you give each of those two cohorts?
So the new startup, right? Kudos. You're using Python, Java, all the same, great. Continue to do that. Good practice. Probably not much, just continue good risk management practices. And do your due diligence and so on and so forth. For the folks that have been using unsafe languages for pretty much your entire existence, that's a different approach, obviously. It's going to cost time, effort, and money, right, to make that move, right? First, you have to acknowledge, right, that this is an issue, right, that this is the root cause. Once you acknowledge, and when I say acknowledge, I mean all the way up to the board level, right, has to acknowledge this. And then once there's acknowledgement, then hopefully there's support, in terms of leadership support, not just with the money, but, with, proclamating as well, right? Saying to the entire organization, this is what we need to do. Needs to be an all of organization effort. We need to all work together, IT teams, security teams, all, product teams. We all need to work together, right? And not saying that we need to do this overnight. It's not possible to do it overnight, right? But there needs to be a plan in place, right? And there has to be a construct so that the overarching goal can be accomplished within a reasonable finite amount of time. Some projections estimate, depending on how large the organization is, it could take 10 years. It just depends. There's a lot of different varying factors.
Thank you, makes sense. And how do you then balance the notion that we're going to embed security up front, which is absolutely the right thing, with developers that are eager to get sprints out and release cycles and get going? How do you make that as frictionless as possible? Do you just embed it as part of their overall culture and it's driven from the top, or are there tools or technologies that can help with that? How do you make that easy for developers?
Well, I think the first thing is it starts with leadership, right? Because the leadership is is basically driving the activities, right? They're saying move fast. It's all good intentions, right? We need to get this product out as quickly as possible for a competitive advantage and to serve our customers' needs and wants, so they can have a frictionless experience. All good intentions, all good intentions, right? But it often comes with a trade-off to security, right? And so the message should be that there should be a balance, right? It shouldn't be a sacrifice to one or the other. There should be a balance. And so you do that when you do things like, integrating security requirements, validation checks, or verification checks within the continuous integration, continuous delivery, workflow, right? You do that at you do gate checks, right, at certain junctures, and you build those in where it makes sense. So yes, there'll be, a little bump in the road, but it won't be a full stop, right? So you can still get both, right, in a balanced approach, and serve two masters, so to speak, right? You can get the speed, but you can get the quality at the same time. The other thing too is making sure that authoritative sources, whether typically the internal authoritative sources, policies, standards, and so on and so forth, are reviewed frequently, especially in the domain of cybersecurity, information security. Our space, it changes, it evolves fairly quickly, right? And so your reviews of those related policies or standards, internal, right? Typically they're done on an annual basis, but maybe have to do it more often, right? So recently had with the executive order, right? Again, mentioned that a lot of standards, frameworks, and other resources have been born out of that executive order. One of which is the cybersecurity software framework, right? Good stuff, lots of good stuff in there. Excuse me, but believe it or not, in some organizations, it's not reflected anywhere as a reference within their standards or policy. And so if your IT teams or your security teams or a security team is saying, well, you should do this, the developer team, you should do this because it's a best practice. Well, I don't see that in the standard. I don't see that in the policy. Therefore, I'm not required to do it, so I'm not going to do it, right? So we're talking about social control or incentives, right? And so, so your administrative things such as your policies and standards, those are administrative controls, right? And so if you don't have those controls are not up to date and relevant for the current times, right? You take away some of the incentives that could be leveraged to help folks do the right thing.
So, changing topics a little bit. You and I first started talking about a lot of these topics in the context of the Klarytee platform, and you've been a valuable design partner for us, and your feedback has been incredible in terms of helping us think through how we solve some of these big problems around security by design by building encryption and data controls around at the source of the data itself, and therefore enabling some of these principles. I'm curious to hear your thoughts around how you see technologies like data-centric security and homomorphic encryption and a lot of these new tools that are coming out in the security industry, what role they play in the overall journey towards security by design, and whether there are any other technologies that I haven't mentioned that you're excited about as well.
So I appreciate our relationship as well. It's been great, and you have a great product. And in terms of how it could help with the whole secure by design, for example, so during pen testing, right? One of the these folks are going in and looking for um, uh, data, right, that's been exposed, for example, like sensitive data. And so, and it happens all the time. You come back and say, yeah, we found this, we found that. And even in the reports, it should be obfuscated. So it's not, that sensitive data is not shared. It shouldn't even be shared in a report, the final report, right? And so something like Klarytee, a product like Klarytee can absolutely have value, right? And making sure that sensitive data across the entire ecosystem of an organization is not is hidden, right? Unless it's an authorized user, right? And my understanding is that Klarytee can do that in pretty short form, right? And so, I mean, that's pretty groundbreaking stuff, right? So that helps pen testing teams, software development teams. That's one less, and when I say one, it's a very big one, right? One less thing they have to worry about, right? In terms of some other things, AI, is a big thing, right? So some groundbreaking thing I think is groundbreaking is, so you have security requirements validation, right? It's so you have software development folks, they understand coding. You have security folks, that's their thing is security. But the way they understand these concepts are often orthogonal, right? One is thinking in this way, and another group is thinking in this direction, right? And so very, very tough, very challenging, especially in our day and age, to find a person, or let alone a team of persons that possess both of those skill sets, that can both code and understand security in order to perform security requirements validation during the DevSecOps workflow, right? And so, well, let's just say you find some people. Let's just say you found 5 of these people, five of these unicorns, right? And you hire them, you put them on your team. Well, it's still not scalable. It's still not scalable, right? They may be the smartest, most bright, most talented people in the world, but you can't scale professional judgment, right? So that's where AI comes into play. So you can have AI, I'm going to be very careful I say this, not to replace people, but to augment them. So augment professional judgment with AI, I think is something that we're on the cusp of doing. I don't know if it's perfected yet, but I think it's possible, and it must be done.
And I guess just touching on the point about, we're not perfect yet. I guess the point is we don't need to be perfect, because actually it's going to be a journey. And as long as we're doing it better and better each day, that's the trajectory we want to be on, right?
Yes. And, again, so you have your tactical strategy, which is secure by design and all these other things talked about. Then you have your strategic, right? The long-term objective is to, in my opinion, right, move away from unsafe programming languages to more safe. And to my knowledge, maybe this is an opportunity for you in the Klarytee team, is that there isn't a solution today where there's some type of machine learning that can go in through and crawl through the organization's ecosystem, find the unsafe language, and replace it with safe language. I'm not aware of any solution that can do that today. But if there is one, it will be a multi-billion-dollar industry, I guarantee.
Maybe one of our listeners will come up with something.
Because that's the thing, right? Because it's going to take a long time to do it in a more traditional way. But if you can have a machine learning, solution, you can do it in short order. You can do it in just a year or less, maybe, right? So lots of folks are going to be very not including the government, right? The entire world would be interested in something like that.
Amazing. Yeah, that's really good insights, actually. So just in terms of some of the closing thoughts, a lot of our listeners are probably really curious about this topic and want to learn more about it, but don't necessarily know where to look. Do you have any advice around useful resources where our listeners can find out more about some of the principles we've talked about today, and any advice you would give to development teams as well looking to prioritize security without compromising speed and innovation?
Thanks. Great question. Thank you. CISA.gov is a great resource. OWASP, great resource. There are LinkedIn, believe it or not, there's a lot of smart people out there, smarter than me, right, that are on LinkedIn. And it just make sure that they're, LinkedIn has done a really good job. I have to put this out there. I got to give them a plug with their feed, right? All you got to do is when you see something on your feed that you don't like, you tell the algorithm that you don't like it, basically, right? And then eventually, over time, things that you don't like will no longer be there, and all the content you do like will be there, right? And this includes, feed information or content from some very, very smart thought leaders in our industry. Okay, and that I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I just listen to and I learn from folks that have been doing this for decades more than I have, and I'm just riding on their shoulders. And and that's the thing too. Just continuously learn. I love to learn. My mind is like a sponge, even at this age, right? But I love to learn. I have tons of books, and I'm always reading, and I'm reading this new standard. I'm telling you, it's like something that I thought I knew, I really didn't know. Always expand your mind. And if you want to follow me, I do. I'm always sharing, the tips from other folks and other resources. So you're welcome to follow me as well. I'm not very big on the following thing. I'm a low-key guy, but I do share things that I think that would be helpful.
Perfect. Thank you, Tim. We'll be sure to include all of those links that you mentioned as well in the notes too.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, I think, is there anything else we wanted to cover?
One thing, I think one of the questions you had too is some of the challenges that teams can face. I don't know if we touch on that, if it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things, I think it's important to mention this because I think one of the challenges that I've noticed is cognitive overload, right? And because you're constantly switching from one very complex topic to another, it can have some impact, right? And so it can lead to decreased focus and attention, which can result in lower quality work and increased error rates. Continuous high cognitive load can contribute to burnout, leading to decreased morale and motivation, right? Those are all things we need to bring, highlight and bring attention to, right? So some of the solutions that I've heard is, again, continuous learning, right? Gamification, such as wargaming, focusing on not just identifying vulns, but how to fix them, right? So that's part of the learning process, right? Clear roles and responsibility can reduce ambiguity and avoid duplication of efforts, resulting in increased mental bandwidth for more critical tasks. Embedding security functional specialists within dev teams to assist with pre-planning and planning activities. So today there's a practice of security champions, but they're part of the IT team. I'm suggesting take it one step further, right, and actually have this a dedicated security person, right, as a functional specialist embedded in the team. That will it complements the existing security champions team, and it helps accelerate the shift to the left.
Right, so with that, it just leaves me to thank both Tim and Nithin for their time today. Really insightful debate and fireside chat around security and the shift to the left. Please subscribe to our panel series where we have more experts going through various topics. So thanks, Tim, for your time.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Always a pleasure.